Hello and welcome. I am Excellent and this is my channel. Today we're going to talk about something a little educational. We're going to discuss the history behind the legend of why do witches ride brooms. Before we get started, if you would please give this video a thumbs up, I'd greatly appreciate it. It helps my channel to be seen and recommended. And if you are not subscribed, if you would please consider doing so. That also helps my channel to be seen and recommended. And if you click that bell, you'll be notified when my content goes live. All right, let's talk about witches and brooms. From pagan rituals to hallucinogenic herbs, the story of witches and brooms is a wild ride. So let's go on it, shall we? The evil green-skinned witch flying on her magic broomstick may be a Halloween icon and also a well-worn stereotype. But the actual history behind how witches came to be associated with such an everyday household object is anything but dull. It's not clear exactly when the broom itself was invented, but the fact that sweeping was done centuries ago in ancient times probably started with people using bunches of thin sticks or reeds or other natural fibers to sweep dust aside or ash from a fire or a hearth. As J. Brian Lauder writes, this household task even shows up in the New Testament, which dates to the 1st and 2nd centuries A.D. The word broom comes from the actual plant or a shrub that was used to make many early sweeping devices. It gradually replaced the Old English word besom, though both terms appear to have been used until at least the 18th century. From the beginning, brooms and besoms were associated primarily with women, and this ubiquitous household object became a powerful symbol of females in their homes. Despite this, the first witch to confess to riding a broom or a besom was actually a man. Guillaume Edeling was a priest from Saint-Germain-en-Laye near Paris. He was arrested in 1453 and tried for witchcraft after publicly criticizing the church's warning about witches. His confession came under a little bit of torture, and he eventually repented, but he was still imprisoned for life. By the time of Edeling's confession, the idea of witches riding around on broomsticks was already well established. The earliest known images of witches on brooms dates back to 1451, when two illustrations appeared in the French poet Martin Lafranc's manuscript La Championne des Dames, the Defender of Ladies. In the two drawings, one woman soars through the air on a broom, the other flies aboard a plain white stick. Both wear headscarves that identify them as Waldensians, members of a Christian sect founded in the 12th century, who were branded as heretics by the Catholic Church, partly because they allowed women to become priests. Anthropologist Robin Skelton, by the way, does anybody see the irony in that last name other than me? Okay. Says the association between witches and brooms may have roots in a pagan fertility ritual, in which rural farmers would leap and dance astride poles, pitchforks, that sounds dangerous, or brooms in the light of the full moon to encourage the growth of their crops. Is that a fertility ritual? This broomstick dance, she writes, became confused with common accounts of witches flying through the night on their way to orgies and other illicit meetings, as one does. Broomsticks were also thought to be the perfect vehicle for the special ointments and salves that witches brewed up to give themselves the ability to fly, among other depraved activities. In 1324, when the wealthy Irish widow Lady Alice Kyteler was tried for sorcery and heresy, investigators reported that in searching Kyteler's house, they found a, quote, pipe of ointment, wherewith she greased a staff, upon which she ambled and galloped through thick and thin. How dare she? Pharmacologist David Kroll writes in Forbes that alleged witches in the Middle Ages were thought to concoct their brews from such plants as deadly nightshade, henbane, mandrake, jimsonweed, all of which would have produced hallucinogenic chemicals known today as tropane alkaloids. Whoops. According to some historical accounts, rather than ingest these mind-altering substances by eating or drinking, which would have caused intestinal distress, witches chose to absorb them through their skin, often in the most, intimate areas of their bodies. In his book, Murder, Magic, and Medicine, John Mann cites a 15th century text by the theologian Jordanes de Bergamo, who wrote that the vulgar believe and the witches confess that on certain days or nights they anoint a staff and ride on it to the appointed place, or anoint themselves under their arms and in other hairy places. It's impossible to know whether such stories reported at the height of anxiety over witchcraft in Europe in the Middle Ages reflected reality or not. Most of what we know today about medieval witchcraft comes from the records of religious inquisitors, legal officials, and testimony from accused witches themselves while they were being tortured. Beginning in the 17th century, accounts of witches using broomsticks to fly up and out of chimneys became more commonplace, even as a woman became more closely associated with the household and domestic sphere than ever before. According to one custom, women would prop a broom up outside a door or place it up a chimney to let others know they were away from home. Perhaps because of this, popular legend embraced the idea that witches left their houses through their chimneys, even though very few accused witches ever confessed to doing so. Popular anxiety about witchcraft had subsided by the 18th century, although there were still plenty of self-identified witches in the United States even today, thanks to the growth of neo-pagan religious traditions like Wicca. Few of them claim to be taking to the skies aboard their trusty brooms, though. But the images of witches flying on broomsticks endures, and especially on Halloween. Thank you for coming. I hope you learned a little something. I know I did. Good night.